on the screen. And I will put in, sorry, where is the enable? How did I find, where's the annotated? Live transcript, here we go. So I'll throw in the live transcript. If anyone there, I think, oh, it's not, doesn't seem to be working. What is going on?
It's working.
It is? Okay, perfect. If anyone, oh yeah, here it is. I see it. If anyone, if it's interfering, if you take your little, if you put your mouse, you should be able to move it out of the way if it's interfering with the slide. So you can move it away if it is interfering with the slides. So welcome everybody. Hope you're having a great Tuesday. Really happy to be joining you on this webinar topic, which is supporting youth engagement and municipal climate action. This has been high on the radar for Clean Air Council member municipalities for a number of years. And there's been efforts to bring in some of the youth groups to the Municipal Clean Air Council meetings and build up a little bit of matchmaking to test out what are the opportunities for getting more youth engagement in municipal climate action climate action plans. So there's been some effort, and then we thought, hey, maybe this is the time to do a little bit of interviewing and consultation with both youth groups and youth and the municipal staff people to better understand how are those engagement strategies being advanced. What does that engagement between youth and municipalities look at, and what are some of the learnings that we have to bring to the network at this moment in time. And we were lucky enough to get Kirsten, who I believe is on the line. Did I see you, Kirsten? Maybe if you could turn your camera on and you could say hello.
Yeah, hi Gabby, how are you?
Good, good, how are you?
Good, thank you.
So we had Kirsten joining us last summer, and she interviewed, did a number of interviews to better understand where are we now in the lay of the land in terms of how has engagement taken place? What does that engagement look like in terms of the actions that were undertaken? And what kind of feedback from youth groups as well as from youth, as well as from municipal staff to better understand what have we learned thus far in terms of what works, what doesn't, and what is the effort that can be taken? Where are we now, and what are the next steps that we can undertake? So part of the goal of this webinar is to share some of the findings from that interview process with you, and then engage you in discussions to figure out where do we go next? What's the next steps in this journey of advancing youth engagement in municipal climate action? Before we kick off the webinar, I just wanted to kind of let you know that we're joining in the land acknowledgements, and I actually didn't want to let Black History Month go. I want to keep it going for a little bit longer. And so I thought I'd share this video that I found in the history of Black History Month, which I did not know. So it was good for, I found it quite informative, and I thought I'd share it with you as well. And I wanted to let you know that I'm joining you from the traditional territories of the Erie, the Neutral, Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and the Mississaugas. And one of the things, I'm going to just turn this.
Libraries and lodges, social clubs, and civic organizations. It's February, so many teachers and schools are celebrating Black History Month. But there are still many misconceptions and misunderstandings about the past, present, and future of this celebration. So today, I thought we'd go back to the beginning. Hi, this is Mike Hines, and I'm a professor here at the Stanford Graduate School of Education, where my work focuses on the history of America's schools. What we now know as Black History Month had its beginnings as Negro History Week, which was invented by the famed historian, educator, and activist Carter G. Woodson in 1926. Negro History Week was a direct challenge to traditional curricula of the time period, which often degraded and dehumanized Black people. Negro History Week was also inextricably linked to Black calls for social and political equality. More than just a chance to talk about a few notable achievements, Negro History Week was a call to action. Although Negro History Week became one of his most widely known interventions, it was only part of Dr. Woodson's efforts to develop, democratize, and disseminate information on Black history. He also pursued this work through the establishment of the Association for Negro Life and History, its journals, the Journal of Negro History and the Negro History Bulletin, and textbooks, speeches, pamphlets, and materials for every grade level from college down to kindergarten. Now, Woodson didn't do this work alone. Moving from idea to reality took the dedication of thousands of Black teachers, most of them women, who were largely responsible for shaping the celebration through their work in the classroom. It also took the work of entire communities, including churches, fraternities and sororities, libraries and lodges, social clubs, and civic organizations. This reflected Woodson's desire to encourage lay people, not just academics, to preserve and present their own histories. As the movement continued to grow, it outstripped the bounds of a single week, and the word Negro, which was outdated by the 1960s, was replaced by a new generation born and raised in the civil rights struggle. Black History Month emerged in its current form during those decades and is still going strong. So, is this celebration still relevant today? Well, it depends on who you ask. Critics charge that the progress we've made from the 1920s to the 2020s has largely made Black History Month irrelevant. Or that worse, singling out Black history is actually counterproductive to broader efforts at inclusion. Although we may have made progress, however, research from the Southern Poverty Law Center and other sources still shows that we are far from our goal of honoring the multiple voices in our classrooms and challenging dominant narratives. At the same time, new and emerging movements for racial justice call out for historical context, which our schools simply fail to provide. Carter G. Woodson himself was cautiously optimistic that students in the future would no longer need Black History Month if we taught in ways that honored and elevated our students and told their stories all year long. But we're not there yet. So Black History Month will continue to be what it always has been: a celebration, a stinging indictment, and a call to action, all in one.
So thank you very much for taking the time, for allowing me the time to share that video. And then we're going to get on to the guide. Actually, Devanshi, if you can do me a favor, and if you could put a link to the guide, to the guide where it can be accessed in the chat, that would be great, so that people can access it as well. But I wanted to kind of start out and give you a little bit of a Cole's Notes version of the guide and what came out of it. So there's no doubt about it. Everyone, well, not everyone, but I'm probably sure everyone on this call recognizes the importance of getting youth engaged in municipal climate action. We're going to go a little bit about how the different perspectives associated with how people see the importance and the value of that. We're going to go into a little bit of what we heard from the input from municipalities on how to improve, how input from youth on how municipalities can improve youth engagement. We're going to be having a little bit of a discussion on the input from municipalities for how to improve youth engagement. We're going to be looking at some possible action items for supporting municipal and youth engagement. We're going to be doing some mentee input on some possible actions, and then we're going to end with some next steps for this effort. So why bother with advancing municipal youth engagement? Well, I mean, you could kind of say, I like to kind of like, why bother? What's the goal on this? The key important aspect of this is really that they are part of our communities and they are part of our future. And they're the ones who are going to be dealing with a lot of the ramifications associated with the climate change impacts. We're all feeling it. We're already feeling them now. I don't want to say that only climate change impacts are in the future, but we all know that it's only going to get worse. So we know that the youth are going to be ultimately the ones who suffer the most as a result of the climate change impacts. And they play a really important role in helping to keep helping to address the delays that has been associated with climate action. as long as we've all been working on this. They are also very, very vocal and sick of delays. They also, the moral argument that they bring to the conversation is extremely important, extremely important. In addition, their engagement in civil society is critical. I think everybody's recognizing that we need to have our society engaged in municipal or in any governmental decision making, and not just at the time when, every 4 years when we go to the ballot box. We actually need to have civil engagement in our municipal decision making and all government decision making on an ongoing basis. So their engagement with government is critical because in many ways they help us keep the governments accountable, and we really cannot risk them becoming cynical and not engaging in government climate action. We can't afford that. They're so important to the overall effort that we cannot take the risk of them getting cynical. I also think that it's really important to recognize that, as a lot, and I know a number of your folks, I did look at the participant list, and we do have a much stronger contingent of municipal staff engaged in this webinar. So we did recognize that we still need to figure out, once we do this webinar, we're gonna have to figure out how do we get this on the radar of youth. But that's part of the question and conversation that we're taking place. But really one of the things we kind of heard from a number of municipal folks is that it is very easy to get disillusioned as you've been trying to advance municipal climate action within your communities, and it's not necessarily an easy job. But then engaging with youth really does help to bring up that feeling of momentum and critical mass that is so important to maintaining momentum. So I did want to kind of highlight youth engagement can help play a role in alleviating municipal climate staff depression. And no doubt about it, we are absolutely stronger together on this one. So there's lots and lots of reasons for it, but some of the key ones. I did want to kind of highlight the importance of youth voice in municipal decision making. It's not just about them voting. And there are some instances where there's some feelings that because youth are a demographic that often don't vote in the same percentages as, let's say, senior demographic, there's the feeling that youth are not engaged. And I think that's a bit of a kind of a bias in terms of how we term engagement. Obviously we want more and more of them voting, but absolutely it's not the only way that they can or should engage in municipal decision making. So that's just one of the mechanisms. It goes beyond that, and it goes beyond the tick the box consultation that we all know happens. It actually really provides, there is the need to up our game on the engagement with youth. I did want to kind of highlight that youth messaging of the longer term and their moral high ground that they bring to the discussion with regards to the generation that's going to be facing a lot more extreme weather events and the impacts of climate change. They do provide a bit of an antidote to the short-term nature of municipal political decision making. So there's that element that they bring to it as well. The challenge they face regarding, the challenges many of you face as you're trying to get municipal climate action implementation taking place, and that short-term thinking of the 4-year kind of political term, we all know undermines implementation and ambition of climate actions. Now, youth have not traditionally been a demographic that's been engaged by municipalities, so it is a new area for municipalities specifically to reach out to that youth kind of demographic. And so we need to know that, we know that we're only starting this journey and that we need to share our learnings over time. In one thing that I kind of say that is that the one of the factors is that the traditional municipal engagement that often takes place just ain't gonna work for youth. It's just not the way that the youth are able or willing to engage. So we know that we have to change our engagement strategies to meet the demographic and the how youth want and can engage in municipal climate action. They are also the biggest demographic calling for climate action. There's hands down. They've been, yeah. Kudos to them. In addition, succession planning, and what I mean by succession planning is that as the municipalities are going to be, staff people are going to be retiring, we all know that from the from the market analysis with youth that they really are looking for jobs that are going to be aligned with their values, and climate ambition and climate action is one of their core values. Not everybody, of course, this I'm just talking about in general and averages. But the fact of the matter is that they're going to be looking for where they can align their careers with their values. And if municipalities want to bring in youth and retain youth in their organization, then climate ambition and climate action is a key component of succession planning. More than anything, youth can help keep government accountable. So I did want to kind of highlight some of we thought one of the first steps we would do when we were trying to advance this is identify who are the climate groups that we all need to be aware of. And we kind of created a bit of a list, and Laura's come in from Youth Challenge International's come in to the Clean Air Council. And I know that there's been some wonderful matchmaking between youth and municipalities that we are going to be sharing some of the learnings from today. But we're going to have an exercise afterwards. So these are the ones that we kind of outlined and we knew about. But we're going to have a little bit of a collective crowdsourcing of additional organizations and some matchmaking that would be of value at the end of this presentation when we get into the discussions. So some of the main youth engagement barriers. So there is no doubt that youth feel disconnected and overwhelmed by the political process. You know, they really do feel their voices aren't heard or acted upon, and it's unclear what happens with the feedback that they often give. So in many ways, this is not something that's a barrier that's specifically to youth engagement. We all know that municipal stakeholder engagement and community consultation has a lot of improvements that it can take in terms of being a real, true engagement process where there's checks and balances and accountability for what happens with the input and how it will be used, and reporting back to those people who took the time to provide input. We know that there's huge gains and huge improvements that we can do, and it's not specifically geared towards a youth engagement barrier, but more of a barrier associated with traditional municipal engagement that doesn't provide that accountability and clarity on how this input is going to influence decision making or what happens with this input once it's received. There is no doubt that logistical and resource barriers are a huge issue, no doubt. Youth organizations are, you know, like the whole NGO field is an area that is underfunded and under-resourced. And the whole municipal area is another one. But we also do have to recognize that of all of the resource implications, youth organizations are probably at the bottom end in terms of their the history that they have and the resources that they've been able to gain. They are newer to the NGO climate change sector, and so they may not have as much connections or capacity with competing against other NGOs in an equal footing when it comes to fundraising and resource collation. So we do have to ask the question and think about it from the perspective, what can we do to help youth organizations become better supported, to be able to better support youth? So it's a question I'd like to kind of put into your brain, and then we will be having some discussions afterwards. So really in the terms of it, I did want to kind of highlight the youth. The good thing about youth, and also you could say the frustrating thing, is that they will call us out on tick the box consultation processes. They're not going to just, they are much more likely to be the ones saying, whoa, wait a second, this is not true consultation. This is just ticking a to-do off your list. We really need to know what's going to happen with this information. And kudos to them. I think that they're a demographic that is willing to call out tick the box consultation processes. So one of the key things that we've heard in terms of the input from youth, they really are not looking for superficial engagement. They really want to know how they can affect change. So this is part of their core values. It's not just a job for them. It's not just something that's a project for them. a lot of these youth who are engaged in climate action are getting no compensation whatsoever for their efforts. So there's got to be something else in them for them to be engaging in this process in the way that they are. So one of the key things I wanted to kind of highlight, this isn't only just about a rational kind of conversation. This is about how you engage people and how you actually reach not just the kind of rational part of the brain, but how you actually use their brain, serve their heart goals and to enable their feet goals to take place. So I did want to highlight the head is really about learning new things, practicing skills, and that's that's the starting point, but it is most definitely not the ending point. There is that feeling that they need to have, and retaining their capacity to be able to work in this area moving forward. They really need to have their heart be satisfied and feel that they're making a difference. And it's only in that way, when their head and their heart are actually meeting, being served, that they will actually put their feet into action and help out in that way. But they really do want to feel like they're being a contributor to something taking place. And then there's the kind of spirit of how this collective effort helps to build a more effective and cohesive civil society, and the role that civil society plays in social cohesion. It's something that we never really, it's something that's kind of like motherhood and apple pie that we often don't spend a lot of time thinking about, but in many ways it is a core part of what makes these collective actions succeed. So did want to highlight in terms of it, there's always the first approach, which is the traditional approach that's often being used, with his youth as receivers of information, where adults are the ones providing the information. There's another approach that is more of youth as recipients of information, but youth are provided with options for how they put that information into action. It's not just a one-way flow of information, but there's some engagement that flows back, or some kind of facilitation to help youth decide how they're going to take this information and use it to get their feet into action. This can be kind of like in terms of engaging youth in activities. So you can say like, oh, the municipality is going to do a climate change activity, and their youth engage in that activity. And that's one mechanism, because there is youth engagement. It's just that the means of the engagement is managed by the municipality, and youth just engage in that activity. There's the other element of a youth provide input and are informed of what happens, but they're informed of how their input is going to be considered in decision making. And then there's the representative, where you're getting youth to be representatives, and then there's an accountability between that youth, who is your youth representative, and the youth members that they are representing. So just a couple of different kind of levels of youth engagement approaches that need to be considered, and that, trying to go beyond just the first approach of youth as receivers of information. So we don't fall into the trap that we did for far too long, thinking that it's actually the sharing of information that changes people's behavior. We know it's not. We actually know that we have to do more than just share information to actually get their heart and their heads, or their heart and their feet moving, and to move forward. Some of the youth municipal engagement efforts, honestly, I did want to kind of say there's a lot of frustration, and that kind of like in all kind of engagement processes, but I did want to mention that youth really shouldn't take it personally. It's not them that's kind of like the youth engagement. Most government engagement doesn't work for many demographics, but it is especially not suited for youth engagement. So we need to engage with youth to better figure out how to engage with them. And I know that sounds like, oh, kind of no brainer, but that's, there is that element. We need to learn a little bit more about how we engage with youth and what makes it work there. And I really wanted to kind of highlight that this is something, while efforts to do these things are really important to do at the individual municipal level, there's a lot of opportunities for sharing of that information, so that we can better understand what works, what doesn't, and how do we build that capacity across the municipal sector to better engage with youth audience. I did want to highlight the important role youth organizations play. Everyone was kind of highlighting in the interviews that they've taken place how much that could streamline processes and engagement opportunities. So that's really important. And keep in mind that we're only in the start of this journey. We are not at our destination on this, and we need to plan together. One of the things that did come out in the interview process is that COVID has resulted in an improvement to municipal engagement efforts. The online engagement has opened up a lot more opportunities for people to engage in the municipal council and committee decision-making process and in engagement efforts as a whole. That doesn't mean that we are where we need to be, but it is something that we need to recognize that we need as we move out beyond the COVID kind of scenario that we're in right now. How do we maintain the benefits that have come from more virtual engagement opportunities? So some of the input from youth groups, no doubt, disillusionment with the political follow through on climate commitments. My first reaction, I will admit, oh yeah, did I hear my name? Sorry, I thought I heard someone say something. Okay. Disillusionment with the political follow through on climate commitments. I was like, welcome to the club. And I was like going to be the disillusionment club, but there's no doubt. What's really good is that youth are much more likely to verbalize their displeasure with the lack of follow through. So kudos to them. There is a preference preference from youth in more informal engagement processes over formal engagement processes, which is going to pose a challenge for municipalities because a lot of the processes of engagement thus far that municipalities use are more formal engagement processes. So it is worthy kind of like giving that some thought to think about how do we address that preference. And a lot of youth groups and some of the kind of youth input that came is like, you know, there's certainly the desire for youth groups to do deputations, but that's a bit like, certainly youth find that deputations are stressful. And when I've had some conversations with some of the youth, I was like, you know what, it doesn't get less stressful. I've been doing deputations for years and years, and I still get nervous every time I do a deputation. It's just a nerve-wracking process. It's not a process that where you feel it, but maybe the better thing is like just there was a mention of youth groups who really want to understand all the policy issues, but in order to, you don't need to understand all of the policy nuances to do a deputation. But that is something that we did hear from from many of the youth groups and from some of the youth is that they'd like to learn a little bit more about the municipal policy, understanding the context for things. Why is this action important? So that they feel better equipped to be able to do that more kind of formal engagement processes. So there is a lot of challenges in navigating the political world. Again, this is something that all experience, but I think it's extremely challenging for youth as a whole. And they don't know how best to affect change, and they would love to get a better understanding of that. So one of the things that youth groups have been mentioning is that they believe their members would benefit from training on the role and responsibilities at different levels of government on climate roles, responsibilities, and opportunities. So just a little heads up that we will be going into discussions on this one, but sorry, there may be the opportunity for a governmental climate action and governance education series that can be a bit of a kind of, you know, that would be shared with youth groups and created a bit of a onboarding program for youth and for youth groups to use when they onboard youth climate champions within their network. And it's something I wanted to kind of throw out there as a possibility. We will be going into some discussions on that one. So some of the kind of challenges of navigating the municipal climate actions and decisions, you know, the hidden away agendas, or like the agendas and hidden away reports, trying to find them sometimes can be pretty challenging. And they're challenging for folks who are often, you know, in the municipal sector to try and find those right council reports or what decisions are coming up. So there's some really good opportunities for streamlining transparency on what climate decisions are going up and how to understand what those climate decisions are and what stage or how they're getting advanced at committees and councils. So there's some opportunities on that one. There's no doubt scheduling challenges, many of the students get engaged or many of the youth get engaged via their student roles. Schools during the summertime, they may not be as active. There may not be as many opportunities. Some students are often more free in the evenings. Municipal staff need to have their own private time. They're not going to, that if they go into the evenings now, they're using their volunteer time. So there might be some kind of scheduling challenges that we also need to address. There's some resources challenges. I'm not sure what we do about that. That's going to be an ongoing challenge, and it always remains an ongoing challenge. But it is important to recognize that youth of all the demographics, youth are the ones that are probably going to have the largest resource challenges associated with them. Outside of, poverty, engagement is also another area where that's going to be a huge factor that needs to be brought into consideration. And then I really wanted kind of, municipalities sharing their experiences on what strategies they're using to advance their engagement practices, what's working, what hasn't, and why hasn't it worked, if they have any insights on that. So there's some really good opportunities for that sharing across the municipal network to facilitate capacity all across. Municipal input on youth engagement efforts, what they've found and what they've learned from their experiences. One of the key things that came up loud and clear, there is very little resources in the climate kind of budgets for youth engagement. It's undertaken in many ways as a voluntary initiative that many of the staff people undertake. That's not in their job description. It's not in their, but it's something that they do because they think that's really important and they want to advance that. But there's also that limitation that needs to be recognized. Many municipal staff people were not sure who and how to engage. And that's one of the reasons why we thought it'd be really good to get a little bit of a roster of youth groups and do a little bit of matchmaking and awareness building on who's who and what's what and what they do. So that's one area that we wanted to kind of highlight as a potential action item. There's a lot of challenges that municipal staff have with regards to engaging in youth in the way that youth want to be engaged. It's not because they don't want to, it's because those are often not traditional ways that municipalities have engaged in the past. And in order to move in that direction, it takes resources, and it's often not the resources that the climate staff have. So there's something that needs to be there needs to be a little bit more of an expectation and understanding across the different groups, so that each understands the situation that the other is facing and has a little bit of empathy for that situation. There is no doubt that all municipal staff have acknowledged that navigating the government process for youth is a huge challenge. And the one thing that did come up in terms of keeping youth groups informed and youth networks informed of when decisions are coming to council. I think there's, again, this is where some understanding of the different roles and responsibilities that everybody has, but there's sometimes challenges for staff. Like, staff would be in an awkward position. They can't necessarily call and kind of like, hey, come do deputations, and because their job is to provide council with information that the council needs to make their decisions. Municipal staff people aren't necessarily the quote unquote decision makers, because ultimately council is the decision maker in municipalities. But and staff people's job is to inform council with as much information for them to make their decision. So being the advocates and trying to get deputations, we got to figure out a way to get this on the radar of youth without putting staff in an awkward position with regards to the advocacy role that they can and should not, or can and cannot play. So there's some understanding that we think that could be of value on that one. Just a little bit more municipal input on youth engagement efforts. There's no doubt there, again, awareness and knowledge building, that it's more than actions and decision, that awareness and knowledge building for more than just actions and decision make, the moving towards actions and decision making. The question is, what role can youth play in decision making when there's a government process in place for that decision making? So how does that kind of take place, and what's the realistic expectations that each needs to understand in terms of roles and responsibilities? there is a huge recognition that youth are not provided with any resources to do this hard work, and that they, and youth groups do not engage in an equal footing with, more established older NGO sectors. So I think that there's some understanding in terms of expectations, realistic expectations with youth for the role that municipal staff can play. So I do think there's some opportunities to better understand that. And youth groups in schools are common avenues that municipalities have used. And that does mean that there's a scheduling challenge in terms of summertime or ways to do that engagement on an all the year time basis. But there is one of the recognition that it's in many ways one of the best strategies is helping others who are better equipped to engage with youth to be able to get engaged in the municipal engagement process. So it's not always the municipality who has to do that engagement process. They can support others to do that engagement process as well. So I'm not done yet. There's some more. COVID and online engagement, game changer for youth engagement. It's made a big difference. We should not lose that progress that we've made. There is youth succession planning, sustaining engagement. Youth come in and youth go in and out of youth organizations. They they move from different from high school to university to whatever they might other ways they might engage. There's a need to understand succession planning and how can municipalities support youth organizations on that succession planning, because it does take onboarding new youth. I'm sure it takes a huge amount of time on those youth organizations. And if there's something we can do to help them on that one, that'll help everyone. And I did want to highlight, that there was acknowledgement from a lot of municipal staff, like, look, there's shoddy engagement efforts across all, and it's not just youth, just and again, lack of staff time. That's I'm not sure what we do about that one, but we do have some ideas. And some of the ideas on this one, I was really excited because in our upcoming webinar where Brantford is going to be sharing their climate lens, they're also going to be speaking to a position that they've just got brought into the municipality who's dedicated to youth engagement. And I see that as a really good leading practice, to have a staff person who's engaged on youth engagement, obviously not just for climate action, but having that staff position shows that a municipality is really serious about this. And climate is one of possible ways that they can be engaged. So we did want to go into a little bit of the possible actions. First, what we're going to do is youth groups and municipal matchmaking. Who are the youth groups? How can we streamline municipal awareness of those youth groups? And how can we streamline avenues for engaging with them? So we're going to get into some of those questions. How can youth groups be better supported to facilitate municipal youth engagement opportunities? We'd love to get your input on that as well. We're going to be exploring some of the realistic options of how we might be able to deliver a governmental climate action and governance education series, and how we can make sure that that series is available on an ongoing basis to bring, so that it can be part of an onboarding process for youth engaged in municipal climate action or climate action as a whole. Transparency and accessibility. How do we streamline access to or how do we streamline knowledge of the climate change decisions that are being put in front of committees and councils? We all know we'll get into some discussions, and we know that a lot of municipalities have a subscribe function on their agendas for their committees and their councils. And that's one way to start the process out. But we all know that even with that subscribe option, it's always not the easiest to find out when it's going into council, what's the time it's going to be discussed. We know that there's some areas, and we'd like to do some brainstorming on how do we streamline that process for youth. And I don't think that if we find a way to streamline that process, I don't think it's only going to be useful for youth. I think it'll be useful for a lot of people. So it's a good opportunity. And then ongoing, what can we do? How can we share across municipalities on youth engagement efforts? What is being tried? What is working? What isn't? And what are our possible improvements that we can do? So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And I am going to, oops, I just lost my, where is the videos? Okay, so we're gonna, thanks, Devanshi, thank you. Oh, yay! So that's fantastic. Cornwall has recently created a Youth for Climate Action working group. That's fantastic. All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna get into some discussions. I'm gonna bring in the Monty. Sorry, any questions, feedback from folks while we're getting to the consultation process? Where is everybody? Huh? Is anyone out there?
We're here, Gabby.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. It's like, did something happen? It's like, did I quit the webinar without realizing it? Any feedback? Any input that folks would like to bring before we get into the discussion? No? All right, so I'm going to just bring in the Menti then. Give me one sec. Seem to have lost the URL for where it was done. I am going to, so here we go. I am going to bring that here. Oops, I got to bring my sharing screen back again. Sorry. And I'm going to bring this in. And first things first, we're gonna go into how useful was this webinar. And what you'll need to do, I'm gonna just copy the link and throw it into the chat. But if you could just go, you can go on your smartphone, you can go, if you have multiple screens, you can go on that as well. But if you go to that URL, you should be able to provide your input on just how useful they found the webinar. But, you know, again, the question, you know, really kind of how useful, what not useful, and then how you figure you could apply it into your work. So that's always one of the opportunities. It's really useful, but if I don't know how to apply it, that kind of cuts back on the usefulness of it all. All right, perfect. So we're going to go on to the next one. Who are the youth groups you are aware of, and what are the questions you have about them and their work? So I put in the ones that, oh, future majority. I didn't put in future majority. So I'm gonna just throw in that one. Oops, sorry, I'm gonna just go in so I can add things into it too, sorry. There we go. So I forgot about them.
Gabby, it's Fleur here. I have a question. Do you want us to, like, I'm aware of youth groups in Burlington, right? So do you want us to add like our specific youth groups too?
I think so. I think so. Because
Okay.
I think that there's some value that can come from it, of helping those local youth groups kind of share their experiences as they, because while their location that they might be advancing their climate engagement with will be different, the strategies that they use, I think that there's some value that can come from facilitating dialogue between those local groups.
Okay. And do you want us to list them as individual groups, right? Like separate groups versus
Please
in
do.
one? Okay.
Or yeah, I mean, you could throw it all in the same one. We'll figure out how to separate them. But if you could, that would be great, actually.
Okay, I'll separate them.
Thank you. All right. So I did want to kind of highlight on that one, you know, kind of just highlighting the group, you know, the youth groups that we wanted to bring into it. And then I would love to get some input from folks. It can be either done via Menti. Do not be shy. Do not be shy. Just unmute yourself or throw it in the chat. Would it, you know, like, is it something that you think would be of value to bring some of these organizations and the people who would be good to reach out to them? Like, I was thinking maybe a little bit of a kind of like a meet and greets between the groups, like meet your friendly neighborhood, or not neighborhood, but youth groups that are out there, what they do, how they work, how they engage with youth, learning a little bit more about how they do it. And I thought maybe a little bit of a webinar series that we can do to do a little bit of matchmaking between municipal climate staff and the youth groups that are out there. So we're putting through things. If you do have some more groups, you can always, don't be shy, keep putting that into it. I think we're, okay, so I think we haven't gotten any in a while, so we can go on to the next one. But don't be shy. If you have any other ones, I will be putting, what I'm gonna do as part of this is I'm gonna be collating a little bit more of you can provide additional things. This is not the only kick at the can. You can provide additional youth groups on an ongoing basis. But I would like to kind of get a little bit of a sense from some folks how they feel. Like, what are your suggestions? Do you have any suggestions for how you think youth groups can be better supported to facilitate municipal youth engagement opportunities that we didn't kind of highlight this far? If you see some, ideas for how you think that youth groups can be better supported. Do people think that it's a good idea to try and we'll get into that one, but yep. Yep. So one of the I think there's one of the things I'd love to get a little bit of insights on, and I think this is something that I think will be a good thing to have a little bit of a discussion back and forth with youth, is the municipal included in the decision-making process, because I think that's where the challenge is that many municipal staff people are not, if you traditionally thought of how the decision-making process occurs, it's not like municipal staff are the ones making the decision making. It's really ultimately council who makes that decision. And that's the democratic process that's set up to keep government accountable for that. They're the ones elected to make those decisions. But there's always engaging with the decision-making process, which is kind of like that might be worth kind of exploring that, as maybe when youth say that they want to be included in decision-making processes, they want to understand how that decision-making process is taking place. But ultimately, there's got to be some kind of understanding in terms of the expectations that ultimately the final decision-making process is our government decision-making process. So how do youth engage in that process when they're, an existing process that is a political process? So it's something that I don't have the answers to, but it's something that I'd like to explore, because I know that there's a huge amount of improvements that we can do on being part of the decision-making process. But I think that there's limitations in being the decision makers. And I don't believe that's what youth are saying when they say they want to be included in the process. As much as we would all love to be ones making decisions. Okay, so we're going to go on to the next one. So did want to kind of did a little bit of brainstorming across the network on what a government climate action and governance education series. What's the responsibility of the federal government? What commitments have they made? What's the role the federal government plays? what's the role the provincial government plays? How is the provincial government really, really important in terms of setting up the structure for the municipal governments? I think there's like, I know that, you know, youth have civics, a civics course that they take as part of the curriculum, but that doesn't speak to the civics about climate action and how this takes place. So I think that there's an element of helping youth do that translation between the roles and responsibilities at different levels of government, and how the climate commitments, a bit of it, how does transparency on the roles and responsibilities at each of the different levels of government play, and where their spheres of influence are most important. Because I think that there's some really good opportunities for that. So I'd love to kind of throw that out as an idea. First, do you think that there would be value in a governmental climate action and governance education series? And if so, you know, if there's any suggestions you need, so you have for how to start with this and build it up over time. It could be something, if first questions first, I should have done a poll and then didn't. Do people think this is a worthwhile action item? Yes, no. You can just do a thumbs up. You can put it in the chat. Okay. Thanks, Karina. All right. So if we don't get anything, it just means we're going to come back to you for a future time. Anyway, you know what I'm going to do? I think this is the first question, you know, in terms of it. What I'm going to do as part of this is we're going to create an online way that people can where we can collate the input, so that it's so that it would be so that everybody can see what's the input that's being received. And I'm going to set it up so that, and I'll send it out to you via the proceedings from this webinar, so that there's going to be an ongoing basis for collating input on each of these kind of questions. This will not be your only kick at the can. All right, so I'm going to do that. Tracking climate action decisions going to, tracking climate action decisions going to council. So as we were going through the report and the interview findings, we started doing a little bit of kind of tracking for how would you track climate action's decisions going to council? How would you go about doing that? And, you know, that's when, you know, there's lots of subscribed notions, but and we also recognize that a lot of municipal staff are in an awkward position in terms of reaching out to youth and encouraging deputations and everything like that. So we were kind of thinking, like, wouldn't it be great to have a bit of a kind of event calendar that tracks climate actions taking place in councils? That would be, and then, you know, kind of like a little bit of a heads up that these are kind of decisions taking place. I really think it would be super useful for us. It would also be super useful for youth to know when's it coming up to council. There's a whole bunch of other issues with regards to how council meetings or things that's a bigger long-term challenge that we'll need to address in terms of, you know, sitting all day waiting for your chance to do your deputation. But there's lots of, that's a future kind of to do that we need to kind of recognize. But I think that there's got to be some streamlining to try and take the onus off staff people for keeping people informed of when climate action decisions are going to council. And how could we create a little bit more transparency and easier access to understanding when that takes place? It could be something as very simple as like a form that a municipal staff person would submit when a decision's going in front of council, and the report or the agenda for where that information can be accessed. I'm not saying it's not out there, it's out there. It's just a matter of streamlining access to the information, because I know that you know how to manage your municipal websites and find things, but I can assure you that it's hard for others who are just, all municipalities handle that different. It's sometimes harder to track that. Okay, yeah, absolutely. That's a good thing to know. Have kids get their municipality climate change report card. Oh, that's interesting. I like that idea. And how realistic do you think it would be that you would submit a kind of a decision going into council, whether it be for a climate action plan, whether it be for a forestry plan or anything like that, whether, you know, okay, let's choose just the traditional climate actions. So it's your climate action plan, it's your, you're putting in for a home energy efficiency retrofit program. There's, you know, how realistic do you think it is that we that you would be able to put this into an event calendar that would then make a one-stop shop for council climate decisions? Do you think it's something that would be possible? Do you think it's something that wouldn't be possible? Just wanted to kind of get some, throw that your way and get some insights. As I said, this doesn't have to be your only chance to put this input. These are just some of the questions we wanted to kind of get a collate input. And then the last question is just sharing across municipalities on youth engagements. Is this something that municipal staff would be thinking that's important to do? Would it be useful for you to do? Would you like to learn more about how some of the different municipal staff who have been working on this, what they've learned, a little bit of kind of like a sharing? Is it something that we could do? We can set up a kind of, you know, twice a year webinar time period where staff can share with others who are going to be advancing, to just have this as a topic, and then everybody and then municipal staff provide updates from the learnings they've had from their experiences to others who are going to be undertaking this and would like to learn from others' experiences. So that's one idea for how it is, but there's lots of other different ways that could kind of take place. I just wanted to kind of get some insights.
Hi, Gabby, it's Fleur. I'm sort of going back to your previous question, I guess, about tracking climate action decisions going to council. So is that like, is that GTA? That was my question there. Are you looking sort of like GTA wide?
It would be kind of like Ontario wide.
Or Ontario or whatever it is, like one common calendar? And then this would be for anyone, for youth, for, like there'll be one calendar that anyone could sort of tap into and say, oh, there's this particular climate report going to this particular council in this municipality.
Yeah.
Okay. And then again, that was sort of my comment about climate action is so broad.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. We would start narrow first. We would start narrow first.
Okay. Because even, for example, in our staff reports, we have climate implications section, right? Which staff are supposed to fill in. Either they don't, or they fill it in incorrectly. They don't see the connection. They're like, well, this particular project doesn't have an implication on climate, but the reason you're doing that project is because of increased hazards. And they just don't make that connection, right? So, okay. It's a tough one.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And there's another idea we were kind of contemplating as well is like, is there, like, this is not about this initiative, but again, we were thinking we have on our kind of like scanning out who's got climate change implication sections and in their council reports as a standard section in their council reports, and how are those sections getting completed? And at present, we know that they're getting completed either inadequately, or they're it puts a lot of pressure on municipal climate staff to help other municipal staff complete that section. And that's a good thing at the end, like in terms of, you know, relationship building, but it causes some significant issues in terms of staff time that's available for implementation for the main job of that climate staff person in the municipality. So there's got to be a better way to do this. And one of the questions we also did want, and we will be coming back to you, just a heads up, that we're going to be seeking your input on the value or the functioning of a climate change implications database, that where we would then, where input on those climate sections associated with different decisions can be inputted, and then it could be searchable, so that if some staff person is looking for it for stormwater, they put in stormwater and they get a kind of climate change implications a list of where stormwater decisions have gone in front of council and what climate change implication sections were part of those council reports. That's something that we're just trying to figure out. How can we streamline to reduce the burden on municipal climate staff with regards to that climate implications section? But we recognize that climate change implication sections is a huge climate lens opportunity for committees and councils and staff and council as a whole. So there's some real good value that that section can serve. We just know that we're nowhere close to where we need to be for that section to be as useful as and as powerful as it could be. So I see the time, and I'm really glad. Thank you so much, everybody, for all of your input and for joining this webinar, and for all of the interviewees who provided us with valuable time and provided all their valuable input on this one. We're going to be taking this input. I'm going to send you out an email with the proceedings, with the report for your information. Please share that report as you see fit. Sorry. And then we will be providing a mechanism for you to provide input on these questions on an ongoing basis. So this is not your only kick at the can. There will be a mechanism for you to provide input on an ongoing basis. Never be shy about just sending us an email. If you have input and you're going to find the email associated with the link, just send us an email, and we will incorporate that into the overall collective input, and we will report back to you on what's the collective input that came associated with this discussion. The next step on this one is we will come back to you and share the kind of input thus far and report back to you on that one. The other next step that we're going to be doing as part of this is that the audience that's here today is largely a municipal staff. So we will be kind of figuring out, working with some of the youth groups to find out, is this something that we can, is this something that we should be launching with their youth in their organization, to give them a little bit of feedback on what we've heard back from the municipalities and what was the opportunities and what was the input we've heard from youth as a whole. So that's going to be our next step on this initiative. Keeping in mind that this is a journey, that we're nowhere close to our destination, and this is a long-term journey that we're all on, but we all know that it is far better for us to be working in conjunction with youth on this one. They are not only are they future, but they're also extremely instrumental in bringing the heart and morality of climate change to our municipal councils and to decision makers. So kudos to them, and we want to do everything we can to support their ability to make the change that they want to see in this world. So keep in mind, this is only the start of the journey. We've only learned so much as a result of this interview process, and we are going to be moving forward and learning more as we go, and we love to be able to do this as collectively as possible. So thank you so much, everybody, for all of your input, for joining us today, and we will get back to you with all of the with the proceedings from this webinar as well. Please share that report and the web proceedings of this webinars with others in your municipality or your community who you think blocked. Oh, sorry. Okay. Blocked till 2:30. Oh yeah, no, that's fine. As turns it, I always okay. I'm going to be honest right now. I tend to make the webinars longer because no one ever minds a webinar that goes over, but or no one ever minds a webinar that ends early, but people hate a webinar that goes over. So yes, you've caught me in my trick. But I always figure no one ever minds meetings ending early. And also keep in mind that there's plenty of time for you to kind of have these questions mulling around in your brain and providing input into the future, in the near future as well. And we will be coming back to you with the summary of the input that we've received and the findings in terms of our next steps on how we've tried to get into youth engagement opportunities to share the findings from both youth groups and from municipal staff on how to better support municipalities and youth engagement efforts. So thank you so much, everybody. I hope you all have a great day, and we'll send you an email with the proceedings from this, and please share widely.
Gabby?
Yeah.
I haven't something popped in my head that I just wanted to share. Partly because so I have a co-op student, Lily, who's on the call, who, you know, as a youth, you know, we're trying to get her involved in this because I think that's the connection we need. And I just want to throw it there. And I don't know how many municipalities have co-op students that are helping their climate change, but if there's a possibility to connect those people together to say, how do you like to be engaged? What would work for your group, be it university students or high school students? I think that might be good.
Okay.
Instead of us guessing what they want to see, let's just ask them.
Sounds like very logical,
so,
practical.
yeah.
Love it.
So.
Are there others? I mean, I know a number of municipalities have like intern positions that they bring in on an annual basis with youth.
We don't. It's just us.
Typically, St. Catherine's does. We have students. Not this year because we don't have the budget, but typically.
Okay. So let's kind of, what I'll do is I'm going to send an email. I'll send that up as an action item, asking if municipalities have a co-op student or an intern in place, if there is something that we can do to kind of collate a little bit of a focus group with them to gather their intel. And, you know, maybe there's some good networking opportunities that can happen from those folks in the municipalities, having an opportunity to discuss across the collective, just like CAC staff and municipal staff people do. Perfect. Thank you for that, Karina. Great. Are there any other input that people would like to provide? Thanks, Lily. Great. So we're going to go on to it. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us, and I'll send you an email with all the proceedings. Have a great day, everybody.